Comments were submitted online. This council needs to tell Daryl Issa and Scott Peters to stop funding and spending our tax dollars to the same Zionist military that trains the EPD and brutalizes Palestinians. You're enabling genocide with complacency. While you're at it, reallocate the EPD money to public services Escondido residents need. Spending money on cops over services for our residents as ghetto, do better. Oppose the U.S. transfer of more weapons of war, which would only intensify this already terrible conflict. Instead, please publicly call for a ceasefire, de-escalation, restraint, and respect for international law to prevent further civilian harm. We must act to protect lives and seek to address the underlying drivers of this conflict, including decades of institutionalized oppression and collective punishment of Palestinians through brutal military occupation and a 16-year Gaza blockade. Dear City Council, I ask you to please follow great cities like Richmond, California in supporting Palestine and taking a stance against the genocide perpetuated by Israel. For the past 3 weeks, we have all heard its politics and talking points that pretend that this is an issue happening that does not impact us. It impacts us. We are people. We are humans. We are one. No one has the right to determine who should live or who should die, and Palestinians are dying by the thousands because Israel has decided their lives are not valuable. They call them animals and dehumanize them over and over. You yourselves have probably been exposed to some of this harmful language. I only pray this hate and manipulation has not seeped into your hearts and embedded itself in your minds. We cannot under any circumstances justify the murder of innocent civilians, including children, many less than a year old. We must stand up and stop this madness that has taken a hold of people and work to end the bloodshed. Please do what is in your power to denounce the war crimes verified by Amnesty International, Doctors Without Borders, and other honorable organizations, and call for a ceasefire to save lives. As voices for our community, you lead the way to a better society and world where we do not ignore the cries of others and where we stand up for what is just and right. I implore you for oppressed and war-affected people all over the world, stand against this genocide and stand for peace. Thank you. Please pass this resolution to support the people of Palestine. It is important for Escondido to take a stand and be a leader in our country to show solidarity with the Palestinian people, many of whom have diasporic relations with here in our county of San Diego. Doing so will encourage other cities to do the same and will hopefully bring about a de-escalation of violence and ceasefire that saved countless lives. Thank you. Over 8,000 people killed is not self-defense, it is ethnic cleansing. Please stand against war crimes and be on the right side of history. I'm a North County local. I went to high school at Classical Academy just up the street. I urge the Escondido City Council to pass a resolution supporting the Palestinian people and condemning the ongoing war crimes and genocidal occupation currently being carried out by Israel. The city of Richmond recently did this, and we should do the same to show that Escondido stands on the right side of history. Nelson Mandela, who led the struggle to end apartheid in South Africa, said, "We know too well that our freedom is incomplete with the freedom of the Palestinians. That is because what is happening in Palestine right now is also apartheid. It is genocide. Even the UN has confirmed what the Israel is doing is ethnic cleansing. The land rightfully belongs to the Palestinian people, and the Zionist settlers have absolutely no right to wage a campaign of terror and violence against them and occupy their homeland. Families have been forced out of their ancestral homeland and made into refugees to their own country. Innocent people are trapped in Gaza, which is functioning like a concentration camp. The Israelis continue to bomb and terrorize everyone trapped inside, and even bombed a group of refugees trying to flee Gaza and get to safety. What makes these crimes even more egregious is that about half of the people in Gaza are children. Israel recently destroyed all communications infrastructure, completely cutting off Gaza's contact with the outside world. They are deliberately preventing information about what is happening from reaching the rest of the world. They have attacked families and journalists who try to expose the truth of what is happening. There is no doubt that what they are doing with Gaza is to cut off communication is comparable to the campaign of terror and death carried out by the Nazis. What they are willing to do when the cameras are on is also horrifying. I support the Palestinian resistance. When people are occupied, resistance is justified. How would you feel if a foreign country army came into Escondido and violently dispossessed you and all of your family, home, and land? I understand the irony of the statement, considering that all of this land was stolen, but I'm simply asking you to try and have some empathy. As human beings, we should not and cannot sit by and do nothing while the Israelis carry out their fascistic terror campaign. We need to speak up, add our voices to the chorus supporting liberation for Palestine, and collectively demand that our government end all monetary support for the Israeli regime. Our tax dollars are funding genocide. This is unacceptable. We should use our money to pay for healthcare, housing, and education, not to support terrorism and provoke another world war. I really believe that in the future, your children and grandchildren will ask you what you did at this moment in history. You have the privilege of a public platform. Much like the Holocaust, the truth of what is happening in Palestine will eventually come out, and you will have to answer for your actions and the decisions you make at this moment moment for the rest of your life. Did you speak up? Did you stand up for what's right? Did you condemn the deaths of thousands of innocent people whose only crime was existing in their own land? Did you prevent another mass extermination of human beings? Or will you remain quiet in this critical moment and carry the burden of silence on your conscience for the rest of your life? The choice is yours, and I hope you make the right one. The City Council of Richmond has already passed a resolution supporting Palestine and condemning the horrible war crimes committed by Israel. This week, SavingTheChildren.org reported more children have died in Gaza in the past 3 days than the total amount of children that have died annually in a war zone in the past 5 years. Israel is not doing this alone. Israel is committing genocide of the Palestinian people with the financial support of the United States. Not only have our politicians been funding a genocide in Palestine for the past 75 years, but they have been funding this genocide while telling the American people there is no money for health care, affordable housing, and education. This should not be the case, but it is going to take overwhelming pressure from the American people, including politicians, to stop Congress and President from continuing to fund a genocide. Please stand up on the right side of history by passing a resolution denouncing these atrocities. Thank you. Pass a resolution supporting Palestine. Pass a ceasefire. This is an important stance to show your humanity. Pass this to support a resolution that allows aid and a ceasefire to happen. We cannot support the entities that are only escalating the number of innocent lives taken. We cannot sit back and watch while families are experiencing unbearable conditions and death at the hands of those in power. We claim and have learned these lessons, and now is our time to show it. Peace and power to the people. Palestinians have been living in occupation for the past 75 plus years, enduring the loss of their land, stripping of their resources, and demolition of their homes, while being subjected to violent attacks by the Israeli occupation forces across Palestine. In the past 3 weeks, Israel has unleashed its most brutal assault on civilians of Gaza, killing over 6,000 Palestinians, with over 2,500 of them being children. Israeli occupation forces have been targeting residential neighborhoods, evacuating civilian convoys, emergency aid vehicles, and most recently a hospital and a church. Israel has barred the entrance of water, food, and fuel, and blocked aid going into Gaza for the past 3 weeks, while simultaneously dropping over 6,000 bombs on Palestinian civilians, half of whom are children under the age of 18. These acts are a war, crimes under international laws, and as the news of the loss of life of Palestinians and Israelis unfolds, we must be clear this is the direct result of decades of Israeli occupation and apartheid over millions of Palestinians. More munitions and weapons to the Israeli military will only fuel violence. Since this latest escalation of violence began, Israeli government officials, including Prime Minister Netanyahu, have openly declared their intent to wreak devastation on Gaza. In spite of this, the Biden administration has already begun ceding more military support to Israeli government, and it is expected to include munitions for fighter jets and other weapons. Sending weapons and military support to the Israeli government when its leaders are publicly stating their violent intentions is knowingly facilitating collective punishment and war crimes. The U.S. already sends $3.8 billion in unconditional military funding to the Israeli military every single year, and this support for Israel's systemic oppression of Palestinians and total impunity for Israel's war crimes help pave the path for violence at this moment. The U.S. must focus on political solution and de-escalation, not fuel violence by sending the Israeli military more weapons. U.S. complicity in Israel's occupation, blockade, and apartheid must end. This issue is personal to me as a Palestinian American and a resident of Escondido. Despite the narrative in the mainstream outlets, Israel is currently engaged in and has been for decades a war of collective punishment against the Palestinian people, not just against Hamas. Despite the narrative of Israel defending itself, they are currently engaged in a military campaign that involves flattening the entire Gaza Strip into a pile of rubble and leaving the people of Gaza with no food, water, electricity, or medicine, in words that Israel defense minister. While it is easy and justified to condemn these actions of Hamas, we must not forget the power dynamic. It is the Israeli government that has sanctioned the removal of Palestinians out of their homes. It is the Israeli government who has turned Gaza Strip into an open-air prison. It is the Israeli government that has built settlements in the West Bank, which are considered illegal by every legal body on this earth, including the Israeli Supreme Court. It is the Israeli government who created Hamas itself to delegitimize moderate and secular Palestinian groups. It is the Israeli government who kneecaps the Palestinian Authority from being an effective governing body. It is the Israeli government who has made Palestinians into second-class citizens. Before anyone says they are some Arabs who have citizenship in Israel. First, not all Arabs are Palestinians. Second, just as how some Arabs have citizenship and voting rights, I'm sure there were a few black people in the South in the 1950s and 1960s who had citizenship and voting rights. Yes, I'm equating Israeli state and the Jim Crow South. If Arabs do enjoy the same protections, how come my uncle is filing a lawsuit for discrimination and has to do it as an American citizen, not the citizenship he gets from Israel? While I'm fully aware the City Council would only be able to make a statement, the statement would be powerful and would send a message to leaders in Washington and other governments to consider doing the same. The City of Richmond has already done it. It's Escondido's turn. We need to stand up to the events currently happening and not just pretend nothing is going on. says, "We are with Palestine. You guys are elected officials that are supposed to be representing the people, not your own self-interest. I ask that each of you consider how much suffering this awful war is causing. Children are suffering. I ask you not to include the city of Escondido to participate in this evil act of cruelty. Free Palestine. I have lived in here in North County for nearly all of my life. That is good enough to include me as if I was a resident of Escondido." The Israeli government has declared a genocidal war on Palestinians in Gaza. Israeli officials are openly planning to open the gates of hell on Gaza, referring to the 2 million Palestinians trapped inside as human animals. I studied genocide in my master's program at the University of San Diego's Kroc School of Peace and Justice, but you do not need a degree to be able to see that a genocide is already underway. The Israeli government has shut off all electricity to Gaza. Hospitals cannot save lives. Gazans do not have access to the internet or social media and do not have access to phones to communicate with the outside world. Gaza is being plunged into darkness as Israel turns its neighbors into rubble. Israel has opened a stated intention to commit mass atrocities and even genocide, with Prime Minister Netanyahu saying the Israel response will reverberate for generations, all with the full-throated support of the U.S. It is absolutely urgent that we demand a de-escalation and call for a ceasefire and demand that humanitarian assistance be allowed into the Gaza Strip. We must not exacerbate and fuel violence by further arming the Israeli government as it commits mass atrocities. The Gazan death toll in recent weeks is estimated to be at least 8,000, yet it could be even higher as they have encountered everyone under the rubble. It will be higher still by the time this is over. We need to act before it is too late. There is only one way to end and to address this war as the root cause of everything happening: 75 years of Israeli military occupation, apartheid, and U.S. complicity. As a resident of Escondido, I would like to ask that we pass a resolution in support of Palestinians before it is too late. City Council of Richmond has already passed a resolution supporting Palestine and condemning the horrible war crimes committed by Israel. This week, SaveTheChildren.org reported more children have died in Gaza in the past 3 days than in the total amount of children that have died annually in any war zone in the past 5 years. Israel is not doing this alone. Israel is committing genocide of the Palestinian people with the financial support of the United States. Not only have politicians been funding a genocide in Palestine for the past 75 years, but they have been funding this genocide while telling the American people there's no money for health care, affordable housing, and education. This should not be the case, but it is going to take overwhelming pressure from American people, including politicians, to stop Congress and President from continuing to fund genocide. Please stand on the right side of history by passing a resolution denouncing these atrocities. We as a community need to make it clear that Escondido supports the people of Palestine. What is happening in Palestine right now is a genocide. We at Escondido should never stand for those committing these genocidal acts. Lives are being taken by the day. We need to show support for the liberation of Palestine. As people of Escondido cannot stay silent about the genocide and destruction of Palestine, we cannot take part in history repeating this bloody mess. Though our officials have failed us so many times and have stood complacent in avenging the deaths of children and people in school shootings and many other things, we should not continue to fail our people in Palestine. Please do not stay complacent. If we were getting mass murdered, when we want people to go as hard for freedom and justice as we should for them, it's our duty by principle to do the work of protecting people as if it was your own. One people the same. Our tax dollars that could be going to support the livelihood of Escondido citizens are instead going to support a genocidal ethno-state that is Israel. Stand with your community members and demilitarize by calling for ceasefire, avoid war, and support your community. It is despicable to know that the U.S., among other countries, is still involved in colonialism after destroying so many tribes and other ethnic groups that reside here in North America. We can even look beyond our borders to see this pattern of violence that the U.S. utilizes to displace people who just want to live in peace. The violence needs to stop. We, the people, demand a ceasefire for the Palestinians who are living through hell, watching their home and people crumble to rubble. The people of Palestine have been subjected to displacement and violence for over 75 years. Enough is enough. The people of Palestine need our support more than ever. We need to amplify their voices as they are being drowned by the lies and censorship of Israel. Moreover, our money speaks louder than our voices in the U.S. as we need to collectively boycott companies and brands that are funding this war and military. I support the liberation of Palestine and their right to life. Israel is committing a genocide against the Palestinian people. Please pass a resolution supporting Palestine and condemn Israel's war crimes. Stop the genocide. Ceasefire now. Actually, that was our final comment for this item.